I think we can begin. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's webinar. What an honor it is that you could join us for the second webinar hosted by the Women in E-Mobility Network. We are so excited to spend the next 1.5 hours engaging in a rich and interactive learning session. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the comment section. Let us know your name and where you're joining us from, and probably the name of your organization. Also, to encourage you to share this link with colleagues who you think will find the conversation valuable. It's also a chance to network with like-minded individuals. Feel free to share your LinkedIn handles and email addresses to take the conversation further, even after the webinar. I'd like to take this opportunity to express our appreciation to our speakers in advance, as well as to acknowledge the support of JZ Kenya and our valued partners, UN Habitat. And so without further ado, we'll get straight into the gist of the webinar. Today's focus is on demystifying and sharing practical insights around financing in the e-mobility sector. We will get to hear from financial and from founders who have successfully secured financing for their ventures. We will also have a Q&A session towards the end. So in case you have any questions as we progress through, please feel free to pack them for later and identify the specific speaker you would like to address the question to. You can utilize the chat section and rest assured that they will be addressed because we have allocated time for the same, so please indulge us. So my name is Joy Njeri. I'm the Communications Officer at Flone, and I will be your moderator for this session. I'd like you to help me appreciate Lucy Kehonge and welcome her as our first speaker. She's the head of programs at Flone, to introduce us to Flone and to tell us more about the Women in E-Mobility Network. Welcome, Lucy. Lucy, we can't seem to hear you. I think you're speaking on mute. Kindly unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please proceed.
So much about this first section.
Okay, as Lucy takes care of her network, please allow me to welcome Evan Sumba, the programs officer at Flone. He's a built environment professional with over 4 years of experience in both the public and private sectors. His expertise spans urban planning, integrated transport systems, research and project planning and management. He will be speaking on the common challenges faced by women entrepreneurs in regards to finance and highlighting opportunities for more inclusive, sustainable funding solutions. Evans, karibu sana.
Thank you for the introduction, Joy. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all the attendees. I hope I'm audible. To participants. Yeah, I will take a few minutes to just summarize the common challenges faced by women entrepreneurs in access to financing. And this presentation has been informed by the rapid assessment conducted by the Women in E-Mobility, as well as the baseline survey on sustainable financing models, which can enhance access and ownership to transport assets. In particular, this survey looked at, explored the effectiveness and sustainability of different financing models. The financing models that we looked at include blended financing, pay-as-you-go, micro-leasing, group lending, digital lending platforms, as well as self-financing. In this survey, we also look at the roles of key stakeholders in this sector. Even as I continue to share my presentation with you, I'd like to invite you to write in the chat box some of the challenges faced by women entrepreneurs while they access financing. So I think I'll jump straight into some of the challenges. Yeah, first, what we found out was the initial capital or the deposit limitations. And to explain this in part, I'll just read this verbatim here, which was from one of the participants in the survey. And it reads, if you look at the aggressiveness of women vis-a-vis men, there is a passion about a lady with 3 children who are going to sleep hungry. However, the society limits their rights to own assets, and like the man who can go back home, sell a cow and put it down as for an asset. So if you look at this statement, it highlights the gender disparities and the rigid customary laws in access to assets and financial resources, particularly for those in informal settings. Those in informal settings, as we know, often lack collateral. And checking at the data that we currently have, the informal sector currently employs 81% of the employed population. So additionally to the first-time entrepreneurs, say somebody trying to invest in a transport asset, the initial deposit usually ranges between 10 to 40% of that asset value. So it really becomes a challenge for somebody to come up with that money. And that's why we had the first challenge as the deposit limitations. And on to the next one is the lack of evidence of traction, which involves funders do want to see if you have a viable product when you're pitching ideas. They want to see the credit history, the years of operations, which are always a stumbling block for entrepreneurs who are just starting out. And that's why we had that as well. I think I'll go into the next point, which talks about the complexities and the process of loan applications or funding application and the bulky documentation. So these sometimes discourage people from applying. You look at the excessive paperwork, which is particularly is a burden for small enterprises. Again, you have to align with the donor language when making these applications for grant. You have to speak to the key priority areas. Yeah, so if you don't understand the language, then you might miss out on funding. The next one, which I think is very interesting, is the unethical business practices. Here, we'll first look at the intellectual property right. Basically, you pitch your idea to a potential funder, then they might take a few things, run away with it. Again, looking at this, then we can see that documenting everything might help. Maybe signing the non-disclosure agreements. You might even consider patent protection. And then going into the second one, look at the data breaches, where maybe a data handler goes against the principles of data protection, which just to mention a few, just trying to limit the purpose of using your data, confidentiality, transparency, lawfulness. And let me just pose this. How many organizations outside your workplace do you think have your personal data? And would you be okay with them sharing it with someone else? So as it is in the financial landscape, organizations even go as far as shaming you, outing you to your contact list. And these are some of the predatory lending practices. On top of that, there is usually high interest rates, loan repayment, short-term loan repayment. And of course, you'll end up defaulting on the loan. I think just to mention another unethical business practice is the bundled financing manipulation. So what do we mean by this? So this involves the bundled services. Maybe you put a down payment for a boda, then you get asked to get a smartphone as well, get a TV as well. At the end of the day, you get caught up in this cycle of debt, which the likelihood of defaulting is high. Just to go into another unethical business lending practice is digital lockouts. So in case you delay payments, then your device might be disabled. Of course, this will cut you from communication and livelihood. I think I'll jump into the next point, which is the weak implementation of policies which focuses on access to financing among women and youth. So here we are trying to look at the three barriers which relates to women legal rights, the policy instrument designed to support the implementation of these rights, and then how do these rights realized in practice. I'll just look at an example. Can a woman undertake the entrepreneurial activities the same way as a man? I think the answer to that is yes. And then does the law prohibit discrimination in access to credit based on gender? And it's very clear in the law, if you look at the Banking Act, Section 34 of that Act, as well as the Prudential Guidelines of 2013. So the law prohibits on discrimination on access to credit based on gender. Then what is then the problem then? The problem is the implementation of these laws and these policy instruments. Maybe just to pose the second question, which relates to policy implementation. Maybe do our sons and daughters have equal access to inherit assets from their parents? Then the answer to this, I think it's yes, because we have the Law of Succession Act, which talks about equal rights to inherit properties. Yeah, so what we are seeing here is the realization of these rights in practice, which lags behind. Yeah, so the next one, I think I'll go to another challenge, is the unpredictability in government regulations. So when the business environment is not certain, then the financier may lose confidence in the sector. Of course, this will increase the potential owner's vulnerability. For an investor, then you'll have to take a step back, realign, or wait for everything to cool down. Then I'll jump into the other challenge, which was cited as high operational costs. So we look at the technical skills, the financial resources required for startups. This is usually enormous. Before getting your business to a level of self-sustaining, it involves high cost. So maybe you'll get a breather from reduced excise duties, even zero rating on import duties of certain EV models and so on. Another challenge was market awareness. So you find that there is inadequate information on available funding. For example, if I could maybe pose, is there a current national government plan on strategy with a focus on women access to financial barriers? And yeah, the answer is yes. There's a national payment system strategies for 2022 to 2025. So even with this, then trying to bridge this information gap is as important as accessing the funding itself. Another challenge that we found out was lack of flexibility in terms of payments, in terms of and conditions of the loan. So as the market is at the moment, it's a one size fits all. So whether you're starting out or you're an experienced entrepreneur, the loan products apply standardized terms to the borrowers. You look at the same interest rates, the same repayment periods, collateral requirements, and so on. So for somebody who is starting out, it might be a challenge for them if there is no breather, lack of that flexibility to just get into this sector. And then going into the last challenge, which is packaging information and ideas. How do you link your ideas to the funder priorities? Are your ideas impact-driven or are they commercially viable? Yeah, so if you miss out on this, then your ideas might be understood and you might potentially lose out on funding. I think just to summarize this, I think I can say there's need to support women and youth for this, to go for these opportunities, particularly in the EV sector. And removing barriers in place will then help women and youth to thrive in this space. I think this brings me to the end of my presentation, and I would like to hand over to our moderator. Looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
What's the stake and what is possible? With that, we'll now hand over to our next speaker, Celeste Vogel, who will build on this conversation. So Celeste Vogel is the co-founder and CEO of Viwaka Mobility Limited, established in 2021 to provide sustainable and equitable transport solutions across Africa. Leveraging over 2 decades of experience in international finance and engineering with roles at Swiss Re, ABB, and Credit Suisse, she brings expertise in legal strategy, management, and strategic planning. She's also recognized as one of the most influential women in mobility in 2024. Celeste is dedicated to transforming urban transportation and creating sustainable livelihoods through e-mobility solutions. Celeste, take it away.
Thank you so much, and especially thanks for having me here today. You asked me to talk about my journey to accessing capital in Africa. I would like to take you on my personal journey, acknowledging that some of the opportunities that I had come also from the fact that I lived in the diaspora for a long time. So I want to make sure that I don't, provide information that is misleading, because at the end of the day, we're building on the continent, and a lot of us don't necessarily have a background in the diaspora. But I think it's important to acknowledge that that is one of those imbalances that Evans was talking about. This is one of the things that needs to be also addressed. So in our case, as you said, we started in 2021. And when we say we started in 2021, it was in 2021 that we had a whole year of ideation. I started Iwaka Mobility with my co-founder, Jimmy Tune, who had some experience in running a small logistics company in Mombasa and then in Nairobi, and had faced a lot of the challenges that Evans talked about. I had just spent over 20 years as a lawyer. So I was coming with a lot of legal experience, but not necessarily local Kenyan experience and local African experience for that matter, because I left my own home country of Cameroon at a very young age and spent most of my career outside of Africa. So the first opportunity that we had for meaningful tangible money was through the SECO Startup Fund, which is a startup fund set up by the Ministry of Economy of Switzerland, which is where I had spent most of my career. And while this opportunity came to me based on my network and my connections during that time, I want to also mention that there are a lot of opportunities like that in other countries that are set up to actually support, in our case, climate change ventures like our own, and that are also accessible to others. But here, I really want to emphasize the importance of network, the importance of talking to people about your idea. While I think that what Evan said about making sure that people, quote unquote, do not steal your idea is wise, I think if you don't talk about your ideas to others, it's very difficult for you to know, for others to know how to help you. So our first funding was 500,000, a little bit over $500,000. It was Swiss francs of a low interest facility. And low interest means the first year we were paying just 1%. Second year went up like by another 0.5%. And ultimately, you are able to draw on that facility over a number of years. And by the end, the blended total interest is about 4.5%, which is unheard of in most of our jurisdictions here in Africa. But I think beyond the money, and I don't want to minimize the importance of money, and I have a slide on that. I think beyond the money, what really came with this was really strong mentorship. The SECO Startup Fund has been in existence for over, I think at that time, 15, 20 years. And the people managing the fund had a lot of experience with startups in markets in the global south and also in Eastern Europe, as an example. And so they were willing to share that experience. And I think that beyond the money, we really, I personally felt very mentored. I felt that I was able to avoid some usual pitfalls from the very beginning based on their own experience. So I wasn't coming at the table just with my own experience as a lawyer, but really with the experience of these people who had seen many startups become prosperous, but also fail in some instances. I remember when I submitted my first financial projection, my mentor in that context said to me, you know, what we've seen over the years is that financial projections are really not something we can rely on, right? And over the last 4 years, I think they were right. Right? Everything that we projected did not turn out the way that we thought. But we were also required to write a business plan. And that business plan really gave us insights into some of the problems in our model. And we were able to write that with the support of these mentors. And what I also did during that first year, we got this fund at the end of 2022. So it was really 1 year into what we had done. And what I realized was that I could actually lean on other people's wisdom and experience. I talked to a lot of professors at universities in Switzerland, in other parts of Africa, and in Kenya, at Strathmore. We had some conversations with some of the professors who'd advised entrepreneurs over the years. And that support for us was invaluable because we could actually tap into this collective wisdom and avoid a lot of mistakes. The other thing that I did very early, and this was following the advice of some of these people, was to set up an advisory board very early, a very wide advisory board. It took a lot of courage and audacity to ask all of these very busy people to advise us for free, right? Because we certainly did not have any money to pay them as we were starting. And one of the lessons here that I really want to share is don't be shy to ask. People are really willing to help. And what I think helped us is throughout my career, one thing I learned is that if you go and ask somebody, will you be my mentor? Will you be my advisor? They'll think about it as work, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of their time, and they immediately go to, will you compensate me? How would that work for me? But what I found is that no one ever says no when you go to them and ask them a question. So I would often go to some of these friends and advisors and then just talk to them. And then I ask them, can I put you on my deck just as a person that I talk to as an advisor? That's what an advisor is, just someone who you can talk to and that can direct you. And that really helped also when we started sharing our deck with people, because they would see that we were being advised by people with experience. And I never asked them to join long meetings. I just called them up, made an appointment, and talked to them. So that was the first real funding. One thing that I want to say, and I'll come back to that in the slide after this, is also that getting our first external funding as a loan was actually a blessing. At the time, I would have preferred a grant, of course, because everybody wants a grant. It's easy. You don't have to think about repaying. But when you take a loan, you are forced into financial discipline from the get-go, because every penny that I spent, I thought, how am I going to pay this back? And how am I going to pay the interest back? The first the first non-dilutive was the loan, but one other funding, quote unquote, that helped us was the technical assistance that we got from Power Africa. And here again, I was spending a lot of time at conferences or just network events that were free, right? I never paid for any network event in those first days. And even today, I feel like, you know, as you are leading a startup, some of these events are the business model is really to like get money out of startups that are already struggling with, you know, generating revenue. And I met very early at Sunculp, one of the representatives of Power Africa at the time. And one of the things they were proposing was just technical assistance in the form of support from Open Capital Advisors. And I immediately said yes. And what they helped us with was giving us a team from Open Capital Advisors to help us do a market study. And that market study done in 2022 was really the foundation of what has now become our business model. The other advantages that we had very early, we applied to everything that was free. We didn't necessarily look, were they asking us, were they providing money? We knew that it would be very hard in the first 2 years to get anybody to give us money, whether it's a grant or a loan or even equity. And so I applied to Google for Startups Africa, for example, the Miller Center. And in the first year, 2023, we got accepted in Google for Startups. They did not give you any money. They gave you free Google products, which is very valuable in the beginning. But most importantly, we had I think, 3-week long program where we met literally every day online, during which they helped us with operations, strategy, etc. So that also was very helpful. I was introduced to OKRs as a objectives and key results, which is like a goal setting and management tool that was made very successful by Intel, Google, Facebook, etc. I didn't know anything about it, and that is the management framework that we use to this day. It helps us really stay on track. And so that also was very helpful. And, you know, maybe just to finish this slide, I really want to emphasize that the lesson that I learned here was that you shouldn't be afraid to ask for help. You should really not necessarily look for money, although we all know that without money, you can't really get started. But some of these accelerators also helped us in getting to where we are today, where we are able to actually raise money. And free help is invaluable, but experience help is even more valuable. Then in terms of, I'm just following the questions that we were asked to respond so that I can touch on all these points. What was really hard in terms of barriers to funding, I found very early that people would really come at you. I remember the first investor that came to us offering us $1 million in debt. And at that time, if you remember, in 2022, early 2023, the Kenyan shilling was hovering around 160 to $1. And you are here struggling to put things on the market, and you're thinking, how am I going to be able to pay this back? And I find that access to debt in our markets is one of the things that is most available, right? Like people will come to you with debt, even local banks that is at interest rates that are just, you know, just ridiculous. And very early, I kind of instinctively felt that debt, even though we were generating revenue and we could generate revenue, was actually a trap. And I made, I guess, what I would consider one of my first mistakes. I was offered a revenue share instrument that at the time felt like a great opportunity. I didn't actually see the trap in it because it's actually still debt, in which we agreed that we would give part of our revenue to this funder. That was probably the biggest mistake I made. We took $30,000, and it was really hard because we quickly saw that while you take it, you know what your revenue is, but you just don't know what will happen in the future. And a lot of things happen to make us where we actually needed that revenue. And we were now giving this revenue away. And when I finally understood the way the product worked, I realized that it was actually a very expensive debt. And I'm talking over 50% in effective interest rate, even though it was sort of given in Kenyan shillings. And I felt also that some of the aspects of the instrument were not explained in a very transparent way. And with my experience as a financial lawyer, I felt very stupid because I felt I should have really understood this better. So we used some money that we got from an angel investor, very transparently said, we need some money to just pay this off because this is killing us. And we were able to pay it off sooner. And I think this is one of the things I'll never do again. I'll never take any money just because I need it at that time without really considering the real problem, which is where am I going to get the money to give it back? Even though you give collateral, your collateral is what you need to continue your business. In our case, our bikes. So that was a very early mistake that derailed us for about 6 months, and has been a lesson that I have learned. So my takeaway from this is don't take capital that you can't afford to repay, and don't take capital when you are in a desperate situation. Go to your advisors. One of my advisors had warned me and told me not to take it, but at that time we desperately needed that money to pay some customs KRA fees, and we ended up really regretting that. What kind of instruments have worked best for us? We were fortunate that we got grants. Winnie is here. We got the Siemens Foundation grant. And what I really like about some of the grants that we got is that it really focused us also on figuring out some of our the problems in our business model. And these non-dilutive funding instruments are key when we are in this market where it's very difficult to use equity money to learn, right? So you need these grants. Low interest loans, I mentioned the SECO Startup Fund, and then angel investors. And here, again, don't be shy to ask. I mean, some of the people who invested in us, give us as little as like $1,000, $5,000, $10,000. They really believed in what we were telling them because we really shared. I write reports to all of the people who gave, doesn't matter how much money you gave us. Even if it's not money, if it's your time you give me, I write a report so that you know what I'm doing. And so some of these people are the ones that are today on our cap table. And we really set on not taking any debt at this point, and equity is what we want, a quasi equity or even convertible notes with very low interest, because we really believe that it's important to take money from people who are aligned with your long-term vision and understand that it's important to be patient. We're not going to be able to go give back, 10x in the next 3 years. And so, but we believe that we can do that in the long run. And so we've focused on that. We're about to close our first equity round. And we've been able to really secure investors that are aligned. And we don't just take money. We also want people who will either sit on our board or advise us in all aspects of our business, whether it's finance, whether it's supply chain, whether it's operations. We look for people who can actually bring that and be part of the business, whether it's formal or informal, but we want to be able to have this type of exchange. So structure matters. I think it's really important to choose instruments that really respect your vision and your roadmap. Like I said, we have very good relationships with anyone who gives us their time, gives whether the funding is in financial funding or whether it's in kind. We want to have healthy relationships. So for me, this means that you're aligned on expectations, very transparent with where we're going. Yesterday, a potential investor told me, for example, they wanted us to work towards enterprise profitability now. We feel it's a little early. We feel that at this point, we should work just on unit economics profitability. And then realistic reporting requirements. Some people give you money and then expect you to just spend 100% of your time reporting to them. I think that's just unrealistic. We just don't have the time and the bandwidth for that. We all know how tiring this journey is. And I think it's important to have people alongside who understand that and have experience with that and don't ask you for things that are unreasonable. I also think that it's really important as entrepreneurs to be really responsive. If you can't do something immediately, explain why. And also have people who are available to talk to you, even if they don't spend time having meetings, but you can call them up, you can send them a WhatsApp, you can, send them something and they respond, right? And I think it's important, especially as women, to have people who view you as a partner, right? Not as a beneficiary. Not even when people give you a grant, you're not like to be seen as, it's just someone that is being aided. We're building something together, and a grant is an instrument like any other that, and I think that mutual respect is really important. And last but not least, and this is something that that is really close to my heart, I think it's important to give people room to make mistakes as well. Don't impose your view just because you have given money or because you are giving time or because, for whatever reason. I think we really need that space to grow with dignity and flexibility. And so the lesson here, the takeaway is really, you need funders who treat you as a peer and not as a project. I really hate it when people call my company a project. It's not a project. We're trying to build something here for the next 100 years, right? Yeah, this is something I don't want to be provocative here, but people are constantly calling us to go to accelerators, investor readiness, teaching you how to pitch this and that. And while all of this is very important, I think one thing that I have realized coming back to the continent after working outside of the continent for a long time is that this has become a business model. People are constantly trying to mentor us to, and to teach us. And I feel like there should be a balance between proper accelerators. I've participated in excellent accelerators like Google for Startups, like Acumen, like Miller Center. And those are the people that have actually taught us that we need more than just mentoring. We actually do need funding, right? So while you want to mentor and teach people how to pitch, it's important to bring money to the table as well. So we need capital, not just coaching. We need access. All of my advisors have opened doors for me. and I'm very grateful for that. And some of the money that we're going to be raising this year really comes from, doors that were opened by some of these accelerators that believed in us, and we're not just seeing us as an opportunity for them to go raise money, because that's actually a thing in this space. I think it's always important when people are asking you to send your deck and to be part of an accelerator, you want to understand, have they closed their funding? Is there any funding available? Are they going to connect you? Is it like, are you just wasting your time? Because we don't have time to be sitting in accelerators for 6 months every year. We're not founders in training. We are actually building markets. We are actually leading enterprises. And I think it's important for people to respect that and respect your time. Yeah, so I've mentioned some of the things that we've done, and I think they are really helpful, in terms of getting you ready and also giving you some credibility. Miller Center, Acumen, Seco, Google for Startups, Seed Stars, these are some of the players that we have engaged with, and I only have, wonderful things to say about our experience. And I think it's also important when you are in these accelerators to make 1 or 2 contacts that become like your go-to person to be told the truth. If there's something that is not working for you in your model, you need somebody who will be able to tell you, listen, I think, this is not working because this, and that. And I think it's also important for us as founders to know our numbers, learn what is important. What do people want to hear? They want to hear about your unit economics. Do you have a path to profitability? What is your cost of acquisition? What is your long-term value of your clients? What are your margins, gross margins, net margin? What are you going to use the money for? It's important for us to understand that and to be able to express that. So I think it's also important to learn that playbook and then write it to make sense of what you want. So coming to my last slide now, to the funders who are listening, I think it's important to just also treat women just as another asset class. There's a lot of statistics that say that, investing in women is actually a very successful path. So fund more women-led, African women-led companies, in our case, e-mobility, but there's, across the board. Be patient with your capital, understand the market and understand, don't borrow models that have worked well in Europe and in the US, or even in some other, South economies, because Vietnam is not Kenya, right? So understand that and give us time to test, learn, and grow. And yeah, last but not least, I think it's important not to necessarily only fund pilots, right? Like people fund pilots, they give you a grant for a pilot, and then you figure it out, and then now you don't have money to actually scale that successful model that you have now tested. We need bold capital. We need a capital that matches the needs of our countries, of our continent. I saw a quote that said, just some of these projects may not be bankable with the current funding strategies, but we know when we look, for example, at access to energy, we know that over 700 million people in Africa do not have access to energy. Somebody's got to work on that. This is some of the things that we're working on. So with our bold ideas, we also need bold capital. Thank you so much.
Very much, Celeste, for sharing your journey with us openly. The wins, the setbacks, and the real behind the scenes work that goes into building something solid. I'm sure the founders here have taken home a tip or two. Just to remind our audience, if you have any questions, reflections, or even quick thoughts, please drop them in the chat. We will be engaging you towards the end of this session, and it's also your chance to engage directly with the speaker. So Don't hold back. We are looking forward to your questions. To take the discussion further, I have the honor of welcoming Engineer Caro Ofafa, a visionary leader and expert in renewable energy, sustainable mobility, and equitable development. As CEO and founder of Isafiri, a Kenyan renewable energy company, she champions solar-powered charging infrastructure for electric mobility, fostering inclusion with 67% of women in decision-making and technical roles. She has been recognized as an Africa Prize for Engineering shortlist by the Royal Academy of Engineering for her role in building innovative solutions and is one of the sustainable energy champions. She earned a head of state commendation for her technical excellence and mentorship of women in energy and bears many other accolades to her name. Please help me welcome Engineer Caro Ofafa.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. And I'm very glad that we are having this conversation that is quite important, given that, we are working in a new industry that's growing. We are building companies that are revolutionizing mobility on the continent. So this is quite an important time to talk about how women are attracting financing or why they're not, right? So just to start, I will just explain briefly for those who do not know who we are. Isafiri is main vision is to eliminate carbon emissions in the sector, in the mobility sector, and affordability, reliability are very key components of what we do. We are currently headquartered in Kisumu, and we have 6 different locations in rural and peri-urban areas in the western part of Kenya. Female-owned, we started in 2020, ideation, and then, of course, registered formally in 2022. Now, for you to understand how I approach personally the fundraising efforts for Isafiri, I think it's good to delve a bit into what the mobility ecosystem looks like currently and the main segments that are there and how tapping into fundraising for the different segments is also important. So being able to align and understand what is it that you're looking to solve and which segment is important and who is actually providing financing for that particular segment. So Isafiri's immediate focus areas is charging infrastructure, utilizing renewable energy and providing energy as a service model, and also providing access to the mobility units. So those are the 2 target areas. And of course, now aligning our fundraising journey with those who are also like-minded in that way. Now, what I learned very early is that when you're fundraising, you need to know what exactly you're solving. Because as much as you're looking for funding, you're also choosing funders who will understand and who will respect and who will support the solutions that you're providing for specific problems. So aside from just thinking, okay, I have a business, I have an idea, I need money, it's really to go deep and ask yourself exactly what are you trying to solve. So of course, the barriers that exist, we are all well aware of with our transportation system, cost of operations, etc. And then you have the other aspect of economic development. So for us, our target is rural and peri-urban communities where economic development is a challenge. Lack of access to transportation will impact trade, healthcare, education, agriculture. So all those sectors, in one way or another, rely heavily on transportation. And then another segment that we are very passionate about is women. So how can we ensure that our solution is providing economic empowerment to women? And then, which financer, who is aligned with that and who is interested in ensuring we unlock this market? And then, of course, there's the climate aspect, right? So there's a lot of climate financing, impact financing, targeting climate. And I think that was also something that aligns exactly with what we were offering, right? So what I did, and I said we started the ideation phase in 2020 with incubators. And at that time, I'm an electrical engineer and I'm a professional electrical engineer. I had no knowledge on how to run a business. So it was important for me to hang around people who understood what running a startup means And then, of course, learn from people, get some networks, build some networks, get some mentors, get some connections around that area, but also proving that your idea has some weight on it. And what that did was we joined the Better Cities Challenge. And this was a very small hackathon, which sort of gave us the push to believe that we could do something with this idea. And I remember we got a $2,000 dollar check, and we were able to say, oh, okay, so that's something. Being a broke engineer, that meant that okay, we can start something. So we're very proud of that effort. So what I'm trying to say is at the very early stage, I think taking account of, number one, what is it that you want to do? It might not necessarily be clear, but at least you have an idea, or you have a sector, or you have a segment of the e-mobility space that you want to target. But then going around, don't join too many incubators or too many hackathons. It will waste your time from actually building product. So we focused on the few that we knew we could learn from. And then the Standard Chartered Women in Tech program now literally taught us how to build a business. And that was a very important part of our growth journey. We did not win any money from that, but we actually learned a lot. And that, I think, is investing in women in different ways. It might not necessarily be the cash, but it could be literally helping you build, giving you ideas on where is the best place to register your business. Are you ready to hire? Are you ready to set up an office, or do you want to prove your concept from your neighbor's garage or from your university lab? All those questions you have to ask yourself. And I think these programs really gave us that. And then we also had a few friends here and there who supported us, some angels who came in and really believed in us. Family and friends were buying T-shirts from us. So it's interesting to know that an e-mobility company started selling T-shirts. So it was more Isafiri T-shirts to support us. And I think that was also very good opportunity for us to, enjoy the benefits of being part of a community, right? Then we finally, I think, all right. Then we finally managed to get a breakthrough, and our very first pilot, which was very key to proving our concept, was supported by P4G, so Partnerships for Growth. And what we quickly learned is that partnerships are very fundamental for an early stage company, especially heavy on hardware, because you do not want to reinvent the wheel. You want to be able to have strategic partnerships that can offer something that you may not necessarily have the skill or the time to build, or the money to build. So we got very good partners. I was previously, I'm an alma mater of University of Glasgow, and University of Glasgow is my alma mater, and I was, there was a professor there at the electrical engineering department who taught me power systems during my master's degree. So I'm a Commonwealth scholar as well. And he stayed on as an advisor for Isafiri and began seeking partnerships for us. So I think that those relationships you build, personal relationships, whether you're in school or at work or during this networking events, are very important. And this professor has stayed on with us here. The entire engineering department at Glasgow Caledonian has influenced our product and R&D in one way or another, just because of that relationship that I built many years ago being a student there. So this was a very important part of developing the consortium as well. We had Sustainable Transport Africa, an NGO that is, of course, working in the EV sector in Kenya. We have Dikasi Alexander, perfect project management that held the consortium together. And I think those partnerships, including the EV assembler Kiri, that provided our very first mobility test unit. So that was a very important part of our breakthrough, and helped us to prove our concept, help us to collect data. And I'm always very passionate about collecting data and documenting, providing knowledge products, because I know for most of us who are born and raised in Africa, you will find very few documents or very few knowledge products or on very little data on businesses that succeeded before us, or founders, entrepreneurs who came before us, and the lessons they learned can have a very big impact on reducing the time it takes to go from pilot or MVP to scale. And I think that's why for me, I'm very passionate about ensuring you collect a lot of data and then analyze it, put together knowledge products, and we do publish knowledge products on our blog, on the website. I also do my own personal blog on the side, which has some insights on the sector and also my experiences during this piloting phase. And then finally, we have, well, not finally, but currently, we have managed to raise money in form of with the support of some partnerships as well. Like I said, partnership is fundamental for us. We have 5 projects that we are running. Some are already completed, and using the knowledge and the lessons from that, we managed to be able to approach larger funders and say, this is the feedback we have, this is the lessons learned, this is the market we've unlocked, and now we are ready to scale, right? And there's some matrices that you must have as a business that from the very beginning you're looking at, right? So is it number of jobs you're creating? Is it CO2 emissions? Is it gender? You have to be very clear on what you want to track, or what the impact you're trying to do if you're looking for impact investment. So this varies, of course, from sector to sector. For us, it was important, and we started tracking it from the very beginning. Right, so we, just to name some of the projects we've done, Sunrun, P4G partnership supported, Solaride by EEP Africa, Angaza Africa by Innovate UK. And then we had our very first big contract this year, the Clean Rural Energy for Agriculture and Medicine, that is supporting an ecosystem for electric mobility within the context of agriculture, medicine and healthcare, and also, of course, using energy management systems and innovative flat pack wind and solar devices technology innovations for that. So it's our very first big contract that is not a grant, that is not, finally we are in the game, right? So we are in the big leagues in that way. And then we have Energy for ICE, which is also something that we incorporate within our hubs. So we have not just supporting electric mobility, but productive users of energy. And we also have our very first pure productive users of energy contract that is ongoing for developing ice makers in an electric mobility ecosystem. So those were some of the outcomes of what we did. And then we had to learn something, right? So the lessons that we learned from this experience is that we had to showcase our viability. So coming in broke, coming in without any, international support, any money from, anywhere really. We had to show that we were viable. And those pilots literally showed that we were viable. And the data and the user stories that came out of the pilots that proved that the solution works and there was a need for it. We also built an order list to show that the people interested in your solution beyond just the pilot, right? So the pilots really showed de-risking for investors, and then, of course, product development. So using the partnerships with academic and research institutions helped to refine our product. Of course, the grants provided the non-diluted funding to ensure validation. So for the young entrepreneurs or the new entrepreneurs that are listening on the call, these are some of the things that we considered. So like I said, partnership. Do not reinvent the wheel. Look for those who are aligned with you, and then be clear on what your goal is and who to approach for that. Another thing that I've learned personally is financial discipline. You as a founder, you make sacrifices for your startup. It's almost like a baby, which is a very weird thing, because initially I was very against that saying. I had people say it before, and then it hit me one day when I realized I was not drawing any salary from my startup, and you begin to suffer for that. And you realize that you have to be very strategic in how you want your startup to grow. You have to be ready. So investor readiness, have all the documents ready, your pitch deck, your financial modeling, learn how to do it. If not, find somebody who can advise, mentor, support you through it. Be able to tell your story in a compelling way. And of course, it's an art, but it's also a science. I mean, you have the data, you are the founder. Nobody knows more about your business than you. So be able to tell that. So we learned that very early, and then aligning our narrative with funders' priorities. But I also want to tell, like, if you're just a new founder starting out, like, please do not take any money. I think Celeste said that very well. Like, there's some money that is not good money. There are those who are not aligned with you, especially if you're feeling uncomfortable. And I think, I don't know if it's women who have this gut instinct or instinctive feeling, or everybody has it, but you always know when the questions you're being asked feel very intrusive, or feel that they're not aligning with your own mission, you know you're not in the right place, believe that instinct. Listen to it. I think that has helped me a lot of times, is literally just being able to tell that this conversation is not necessarily trying to learn more about what we're doing or trying to actually find out more about the business, but trying to corner you into saying something you're not supposed to say, or corner you into accepting something that you don't feel comfortable with. So that was a big learning moment for me. There are some barriers that we faced that I'm going to tell you how we managed to counter them. The space that we are in, or the segment that we target, is actually a very high capex segment. You need to be able to de-risk those projects. And like I said, pilot results actually have helped us. And that is one way to approach large funders and say, you know what, this thing works. I have customers who are paying every day. This is the repayment rate, or this is the rate at which customers are coming in and out of the hubs. And this is how they're paying every day. So that was important data for us to have to approach larger funders, or to get the bigger contracts that we have. There's one thing that is also very important, and I always speak about this everywhere I go. I have no shame about it, is that there are existing barriers and biases and credibility hurdles that come with being Black, African raised, a woman. There's a lot more that is expected from you. You have to prove yourself much more than fellow founders in the space. So there has to be a way for you to build credibility, right? So what we did is the accolades that we've received along the way are also part of that credibility. So I am currently part of the Royal Academy of Engineering's Africa Prize shortlist. We have the finals coming up in October. We hope to get that win. But of course, just being a part of the shortlist is quite a good thing. We've been introduced to some good experts and mentors who are supporting us as we scale. The Upshot Prize, we were named as one of the companies to watch in terms of our innovation, and then also named as C4All 2025 Energy Hero Shortlist. So some of those accolades are helping us, putting us in spaces or in places where people actually have believe in us, and reducing some of the biases in one way or another. Access to information. So where do you get this funding? When you start a business, you really don't know who to go to and where to go to. And for me, it was more important that I network. Like I said, I utilize the incubators, not just as a place to learn how to grow the business, but also to network with those people who would plug you into the ecosystem and give you access to where the funding is coming from, who to talk to, how to approach them, etc. Finally, there's some constraints. The local capital in East Africa is very risk averse. There's scarce angel networks. Most likely they'll have invested in your competitor or something like that. So you have to be able to think globally, diversify your sources, and of course, for us, international impact investors proved more interested, or at least were able to support us faster than the local angel. Yeah, then navigating the valley of death. So this is the special valley of death, which is the gap between proven MVP and scaling, or a proven concept and scaling your business. What happens is that you cannot scale using grants, right? So you're usually exhausted at this point. It's a very difficult point, and emotionally, running the business, fundraising is also like a role on its own. It's a whole job. You will meet some investors who are very quick to ask about returns, and they want it faster, and they want the traction faster, and they're pushing you harder than you're able to contain. So it's not easy to be in this valley, right? So why is it so difficult? Of course, we are currently pioneering an industry that is new, so that you don't have very many comparables to work with. You have to literally educate funders and inform them of the bottlenecks or the challenges, or the processes that it has taken you to move from just a prototype into a proven concept. And then for them to understand what scaling would look like, there has to be some education there on both sides. Then, of course, there's the demands for due diligence. I mean, usually there are some funders who will take more from you than they give, or they'll take more from you and give you nothing. So I learned very early, and I think that's some of the mistakes I've made, is you will go through due diligence with somebody who came in and showed interest. They have invested already and they have concluded their investment in that particular sector, but they'll come to you and collect a lot of information, a lot of your data, and use it to fundraise, but they'll never come back to actually input it back into your business. So those are some of the things that I do, is to do diligence both ways. I mean, if you're going to check my documents, I want to check yours. I want to see if you have the money for it. If you don't, let's say goodbye early before we, go too far down the line. So, of course, leveraging mentorship is something that I think has worked. I told you about my professor from Glasgow, using the data cost savings for the riders, new markets for gender, where women can be able to own their mobility units is actually a new market, because most of the time you find that when it comes to 2- and 3-wheelers, women do not really have ownership. They sort of use what is already available. And then, of course, break down your scaling phase into phases, like scaling plan into phases, so that you can be able to fundraise for specific needs. Another thing is that, when you're trying to look at like what is the best financing model for you, I think it depends on the stage of innovation. So for us, like I said, pilots were supported by 9 diluted funds. You can get flexible and affordable debt facilities. Only one that I have found in the sector that support women, and also with a flexible repayment plan. You can get some repayable grants to support you. Carbon credits is one sector we're also exploring right now. We have a partner in place to help us with that. So like I said, advisory can also unlock modes of financing that you're not, maybe previously aware of or like interested in. Of course, there's equity impact. Like I said, look at the matrices that you're targeting and be very clear on how you're collecting them. You don't need to have, like when we started, we didn't have IoT enabled BMSs or things, or battery management systems or things like that, but you could still collect data manually, and we did that, and it was very helpful to see. It might not be the most accurate, but at least you have data that you can use to quantify what you're doing and the successes or the challenges about what you're doing, and also to give back to your customer the correct solutions whenever there's a problem. There has to be clarity. So you need to know, like I had to know what I was looking for. I think somebody's needs to unmute, please. To mute. Okay. Yeah. So I had to know what I was raising for. Was it to explore the market? Was it to unlock a new market? Was it software, hardware, R&D, scaling, capacity building? Because if it's a new industry, then you need to make your customers aware. You have to have conversations with national government, with local government, and that is part of the education process. Also trainings like mechanics who can support the EV sector, operators, and how can women also participate in that entire ecosystem can also unlock a market for you. And that could be a targeted, there are existing targeted funds that could support that. So I think a good funder is, someone who aligns with your vision and values, open communication and trust. You don't want somebody who's always sending gotcha moments towards you. Like you don't want to feel insecure all the time, trying to prove yourself all the time in conversation. You need support beyond money. I think Celeste covered this very well. You don't want people who will just come in, pour money, and ask for returns. You want someone who'll sit in the board, someone who will be able to go through with you or be able to point you in the direction of somebody who can solve something for you. So somebody who's also solution-oriented, supports beyond money. Someone who has clear expectations and flexibility. There are organizations out there that are very, very clear on what they want and what they're looking for. So there's no doubt that if you come in saying something else, then you will not get the money. And you also need to be able to be clear on your side. And that's why I started the presentation telling you what the barriers that we are solving for, because it's very targeted and specific to also who will give us money to solve it. Accountability and respect. I mean, this goes on both sides. Like I said, financial discipline, being accountable, respond as fast as you can, be available. And also on the other side, the funder should do the same. So just to finish up with some quotes, African women are not victims. they're drivers of growth, innovation, and change. You must invest in them like the future depends on it. The future does depend on it. And that's from Grasa Michelle. Another lady I love so much is Gozi Okojo-Iweala. When you invest in a woman in Africa, you're not just investing in an individual, you're investing in community. I mean, these are facts. So it's something that I work with every day. So yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, looking forward to your questions, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And congratulations also for the formidable steps Isafiri is making. Thank you to our audience for indulging us. I see questions are streaming in and we will be addressing them in just a few. But now we are going to switch gears to hear Panda's perspective. Joining us next is Winnie Njogo, who brings a wealth of experience to this conversation. She is currently project manager of e-mobility at Siemens Stiftung, where she supports social enterprises piloting clean transport solutions and business models tailored to Kenya's mobility ecosystem. Winnie, the floor is yours. Please take it away.
Right, thank you very much, Joy. I think we can start projecting the slides just to take you through who Siemens Stiftung is. And today we'll be sharing more about the recent market trends, key trends, also fresh insights from our recent roundtable that we held in April 2025, but also what funders need to know when it comes to raising capital from a donor perspective. So as an introduction, Siemens Stiftung is a nonprofit foundation which is focused on driving sustainable solutions for societal challenges across Africa, Europe, and Latin America. We were established in 2008 through an endowment fund by Siemens Corporation. And we work with local partners in 20 project countries with employees of 51 employees. Next slide, please. As mentioned, we work with local organizations that will be civil organizations or different government institutions to develop local solutions to global challenges. So here we have 3 working fields, that is education, social entrepreneurship, and arts and culture. And our projects are in, again, Africa, Latin America, and Europe. Within social entrepreneurship, we have 2 working areas, which is on e-mobility and also water and sanitation. Here in social entrepreneurship, we work with entrepreneurs in the space to develop, previous slide, please. So I will proceed. So we work with social enterprises to develop local solutions so that they can be able to scale. This is through R&D funding, also training and coaching, but also ecosystem development, which includes dissemination of results from the piloting projects that we support. Next slide, please. In Kenya specifically, we're working with GIZ, who is working on the promotion of e-mobility in Kenya. They have 4 pillars, which is policy and regulation and standards, institutional capacity and technical expertise, building the institutional capacity of training as well. Our portion is on research and development, but basically piloting some of the solutions in the space. And then we have GIZ also working on the development and the support of the deployment of an electric bus rapid transit system. Next slide, please. All right, so our project is again called the Piloting and Prepare to Scale e-Mobility in Kenya. We aim to conclude the project in June 2026. Overall, we target the Kenyan companies in the e-mobility value chain, anyone from assembly to overall end of life. We hope to work with these companies for market-tested products and business models that can really help the value chain, but also create jobs. And also we want to adapt the technology as we tend to import some of the e-mobility technologies that we get to see how exactly they can solve and can be adapted to the local market to also support underserved user groups. So we have, again, 4 areas that we support: pillars, which is research and development, technical trainings and coaching, ecosystem support, and climate finance as well. Next slide, please. Right, so when it comes to the bigger picture, when it comes to the landscape of financing, I have covered mostly Africa. So here we are seeing that major fundraising rounds remain concentrated in East and West Africa, with Kenya, Ghana, Rwanda, and Togo as the leading hubs. Togo is mostly because of Spiro, who have seen, or rather have led most of the the biggest financing ticket size of around $148 million across, just to scale their activities across Africa. But we see that most of the median deal sizes are under $5 million. We see that most of the financing is geared towards E2-wheelers, and specifically even E2-wheelers with those combining that with the deployment of charging infrastructure. Funding for E4-wheelers remains niche, and so we're seeing lesser ticket sizes on that, or rather less volumes. And one of the things and one of the challenges when it comes to reporting on financing in the market is a lack of transparency. So you'll see that most of the funding rounds are undisclosed, so it makes it hard to track the true size of capital flows, which most likely leads to underreporting. Overall, the sector is still defined. Previous slide, please, still on that. So the sector is still defined by pilots and smaller rounds. There are big opportunities, but most companies are raising less than 1 million, and large late-stage rounds remain rare. So we are seeing, when it comes to gender, carbon financing, and manufacturing investments, these are still niche. In fact, as a whole, when it comes to gender-focused investments, we are seeing in 2024, the funding gap reduced to 3% of the capital went to female-led ventures, which is quite sad. And you find that the higher the funding stage, in that more larger Series B, Series C are only going to around 5% of female-led ventures. And this also includes female co-founders. So we see that most of the funders are saying it's a pipeline issue. However, it is not a pipeline issue. I think early stage female co-founders are raising rounds, but when it comes to the later stages for scaling and growth, and I think that has been mentioned from the previous speakers, the numbers and capital share drop sharply. It's not about a lack of talent or ideas, it's about large ticket funding not reaching women at scale. And that's as a whole, and not when it comes to e-mobility, because the trend also holds in e-mobility as well. There are female founders at the early stage, and they need, when you look at scale-ups and later funding, their numbers thin out, and that has also been spoken about earlier. So there's an opportunity for both investors and donors to rethink how gender-focused investment is measured and advanced as well. So next slide. From the recent roundtable that we held, we invited different investors from the e-mobility space in Kenya, that is people or stakeholders from banks, equity, VCs, PEs, and also donors as well. And what's this? IFC, I'll say IFC. So basically, some of the key barriers they identified when it comes to investing in e-mobility is a high risk perception. This is mostly seen as e-mobility is seen as high risk because the sector is new, it's largely informal, and there's a lack of data when it comes to asset performance, credit risk, and repayment as well is also an issue. So without reliable information on how EV assets perform or how customers repay, investors and banks hesitate to fund deals or extend credit, making capital scarce and expensive. There's also an issue when it comes to policy and regulatory uncertainty. I think we've seen frequent shifts in policy. So lack of clear regulations, although we are seeing a surge in some of the agencies working towards having more consistent and clear regulations in different aspects, whether that's batteries all the way to end of life or batteries itself, and also charging infrastructure. And inconsistent enforcement makes it difficult for private capital to invest confidently in the sector. So this uncertainty increases due to, one, due diligence costs for a funder, delays deals, and limits the willingness for funders to commit long-term resources, as you do not know which direction the government, for example, has. And then there's the issue of limited access to debt. So when it comes to debt, access to debt is hindered by challenges in verifying EV ownerships. So how, especially for banks, they say, how do you value the assets? And also, how do you recover collateral if loans default? The lack of a clear resale market for electric vehicles makes banks reluctant to lend, while entrepreneurs struggle to prove asset value or provide acceptable security. And then there's also the issue for high upfront costs, scarcity of working capital for entrepreneurs, and scale-up funding. The high cost of EVs is a given, And for entrepreneurs, there's limited access to working capital or scale-up finance, which prevents most startups from expanding. So fewer funders provide loans or equity for operational expenses or growth. So this keeps businesses small and slowing overall market development. And then there's also the issue of fragmented supply chain and market adoption challenges. Hereby, we are seeing that the e-mobility value chains remain fragmented, with OEMs, distributors, and service providers often disconnected. So this fragmentation makes it hard for an investor to see where exactly they can tap in and where the customer demand is and what keeps it at scale, and the revenue projections as well. Early stage funding still dominates, so little for scale and operations. We've had that a lot. So when it comes to covering OPEX, that results, many startups face a capital wall when it comes to accessing or covering their OPEX. So they need funding for that. As a result, many businesses stall before reaching sustainability. And then there's underdeveloped finance instruments and inclusion gaps that taps into gender lens investing in the space. Carbon finance and blended capital remains rare or small scale, leaving impactful ventures, especially those led by women or focused on climate benefits, without sufficient resources to grow. Another issue was the traceability and creditworthiness of end users. At the end of the day, most of it, again, is informal, and many operators lack formal credit histories, making it difficult for banks to assess risk and offer loans. At the same time, many startups lack the risk management frameworks, so the internal operational controls investors require, which further limits access to serious capital. So in short, there's no single reason funding is hard to access. The barriers are systemic, ranging from policy all the way to supply chains to lack of data, and they compound on each other. So next slide, what convinces these funders? What did they actually say to back a company in the space? Most funders want a proven business model and demonstrated local demand. They are prioritizing businesses that have adapted their model to local needs, especially in e-mobility, and that can show traction when it comes to customer uptake. And they point to steady demand, not just pilot projects or theoretical plans. I think it's overall, how exactly do you plan on rolling out? What is your go-to-market strategy above and beyond, whether that's at a pilot stage to how you're going to scale? They also want transparent, data-driven operations. I think Carol touched on this, and as well as Celeste. Data is king when it comes to tapping, or rather showing your traction when it comes to talking to a funder. So you need to monitor asset usage, repayments, or whatever is applicable to your business as well. Also, transparent and financial impact data helps funders assess reliability and reduces perceived risk and builds trust. So most of the funders in the roundtable mentioned that some of the convincing aspect that tipped their decision was the fact that a company could show, even when it comes to the fleet management, that they could show that they have this data history when it comes to their riders. So those are some of the things that we are seeing funders are looking at. They also looked at a capable and accountable management team with robust governance structures. I think we've heard about the need for having an advisory team behind you to just showcase how exactly who is advising you, how exactly you're tapping into the market, how you're leveraging them. So there's that aspect of also who is on your board, just to give a funder some relief in terms of that there is a guiding structure to your business, and you have people who can give confidence to external funders, and also reduces operational risk, as well as now scalability and capacity for growth. So most of the funders say that they needed evidence that the business can move beyond pilots. So it's a matter of partnerships. I think Carol mentioned that, showing that you have partnerships in the space that can enable your expansion, as well as supply chain control, how exactly you're working on it. So there was just a need for most founders to showcase that they are looking to scale beyond the pilot. So sustainability at the end of the day of the business is what most funders are looking at, so that they can also, because your one initial funder can also open doors to other larger ticket sizes, or open up opportunities with other investors. So they wanted to see that at the onset, so that they can have some confidence in terms of how this company will grow. Again, there was openness to blended finance. So most investors say that they want they want the company or the founder to be more open to different forms of funding, whether that's equity, debt, grants, guarantees, so that they can, as we've seen, the trends are mostly on blended finance. So, and we've seen the likes of Basico, for example, pile on most of their funding in such ways. So we want to see whether the founder is interested in that and is open to that and can structure their business to receive such funding in their business. And lastly, gender and impact reporting. So ability to measure, track, and report on gender inclusion, especially from a donor side. Impact tracking remains king. Carol mentioned this earlier on, not just for donors, but also for ESG-minded investors. And lastly was on the coachability of the founder. So we want to see how exactly you've participated in the accelerator. I think this has been touched on, accelerators, TA programs, peer networks as well, but also seeing how exactly you've transitioned, not just participation, but how exactly have you utilized what you've learned into applicability into your business. Next slide, please. So when it comes to gender responsive programming and financing, I think for us as a donor, we usually prioritize, even though the sector is quite nascent and still male dominated, so we prioritize female-led enterprises for either funding or training. However, I will say that most of the applications we get, it's around 1% that are mostly from women in the space. Again, the sector is quite male dominated. But when it comes to training and coaching, we're seeing a lot of women in the space, and therefore we make sure we have a 50-50 balance when it comes to the selection of those participating in our training. When it comes to also evaluating some of the applications that we get as a donor, what exactly tips our decision when it comes to seeing that this specific application actually taps into the issues that women are facing. I think Evans at the beginning listed some of the barriers for funding women. So you want to see applications that are tailoring solutions to women, i.e. recognizing that women and also youth are not a monolith. So the support also needs to be different, for example, for a rider, for a technician, and for a manager. We also want to see your application talk about how exactly you plan on supporting above and beyond training. You see a lot of proposals talking about training, but then there's additional challenges such as accessing finance. We were told capital is essential for a business. So how do you go about accessing finance, but also building support networks, mentorship, community allies, for example, professional association? Do you have linkages to that? So when we look at an application for grant funding, that's one of the things that we look at and are essential. So combining this training with supporting pillars, that's, I think, from us as a donor, that's what we believe supports or drives real inclusion and also opportunities as well. So what overall, after all this, what do founders need to know? I think from our perspective, your application is your first and sometimes only impression. So you have to put your best story forward. In terms of data, demonstrate your impact. Also be realistic about business objectives and strategy. I think as a donor, we're also quite flexible in terms of what you're proposing when it comes to your proposals, how you go about it. So even though you haven't fleshed it out, I think that the data that you currently have that in play is what drives us to see that you're actually serious about this. Also that coupled with the business objectives and strategy. And then also our priorities on impact. So don't assume impact is obvious. I think immobility in itself solves what's this? It's clean. It has social economic benefits, but then we also want to see how intentional you are about having this impact in terms of supporting jobs, gender inclusion as well, and also sort of local economic value. Are you trying to support or source some of your items from the local market? So use specific examples, don't just claim it. So we want to see how you're working throughout. And I think lastly, and this has been said, be honest about your learning curve, setbacks, or time spent in R&D. Sometimes we can support you with zero revenue as a donor, as long as you can see what you've learned and how you've adapted. And also, I think lastly, align your ask, and we've had this from Carol and Celeste as well. Align your ask with funding call objectives. State exactly how much funding you need, what type, and how you will use it. Avoid generic requests. So you match your proposal to the specific funder. We get a lot of applications that speak about commercial viability, but then again, we're a donor, we're looking for impact. But so immobility, just because it's immobility, you have to back it up, use numbers, pilot results, financials, impact data, anything that you have, whether that's in traction, your traction, or also in the market size that you're looking at. So that concludes I hope this has given you an idea of where the money is, what's working, and what needs to change. Happy to discuss and answer your question. Thank you so much.
Support, given especially
Sorry,
thank you, Winnie. I hope clear enough, yeah. So before we close, we will take a few minutes to address the questions that have been posed, and I will hand over to Mercy Edna, who will be guiding us through the Q&A session. Edna, over to you.
Joy, please tell me if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I know that time is not on our side. We had planned to have like a whole 30-minute session of Q&A, but that's not going to be possible. So as I was waiting for the session to wrap up, I thought of something that we could do. First of all, I wanted to see if there's a burning question in the audience, like one or two. Maybe that way you can address the person directly. I know Crystal was there. I don't know if she's still there. Maybe you can just unmute yourself if there's the option of unmuting and ask a question or raise your hand. Anybody? Okay, as we wait for someone to ask a question, I just wanted to maybe follow up with Carol, Celeste, Winnie, and David on the presentations that they've done. So what I'm going to do is there were some questions in the chat that we had from the audience. So I'm just going to direct those to the various people that have presented. So the first question that was raised was, what financing model would be born if it was designed entirely by African women for African women? So I know that Celeste and Carol would have a lot to say about this. So maybe just in a few minutes, you can probably just give us an ideal financing model that would have worked for you or would work for you better going forward. Yeah.
Right. Okay, I can go. Yeah, ideally, I think that financing models that would work for me depend on the stage where I am at. Like I said, in the beginning, you want something that's non-dilutive, that will support the R&D part of the business. And then going forward, I think blended finance works in the scaling phase. Because, and especially because you're working in an industry that is still new, you don't have something to compare with or something similar to compare with, then there has to be strategic financing that will support the knowledge, capacity building, and training aspect that then will unlock the market for the commercial financing. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Carol. Crystal, I hope you're in the audience, and then maybe Celeste, you can jump in. And I also think Evans would have a lot to say here. So yes, Celeste and Evans.
Yeah, I think, and I don't want to repeat what Carol has said because it's very pertinent, and I fully subscribe to that. I think there are three things that I'd like to mention. First of all, there are existing financing models that work well. The problem is we African women do not have access to those, right? So I think one of the things, I think Carol said it very clearly, is that where if you are Black, if you're African, if you're a woman, these things compounded regardless of your level of education, regardless of your networking ability, these funding opportunities are not necessarily accessible on a level playing field. So that brings me to my second point, where I think we would need to actually address the reasons why this is so. I think some of the funding models are there and just not there for us. So we would need to first address the elephant in the room, all right, which is that we are not considered to be fundable, not because we're not capable, but because we get this third degree every time you enter a room. I've been fascinated by the way some of our male European or American peers are treated in similar conversations to the ones that we have, right? So that means that there needs to be more truth-telling in this space, addressing the elephant in the room. There needs to be more flexibility. And then at the end of the day, I think Crystal asks a very pertinent question. What if we designed it ourselves for ourselves? What would we do differently? I think there would be more long-term thinking. There would be more community thinking around some of these investments. Some of the systemic barriers, such as requirements for collateral when you're already like from the banks, like some of the local banks are not like doing their job in terms of investing in SMEs and startups like ourselves. Addressing that systemic bias would be very important. And last but not least, I think we also mentioned this many times, blended finance works very well, right? So if we can have a mix between non-dilutive and quasi-dilutive funding based on impact milestones and product traction, we could also make some headway in this space.
Thank you so much, Celeste, for that. So I just wanted to go back to Evans a little bit. So Evans, in your presentation, you had a lot of findings. So maybe this is just a question maybe for the audience too. We would like to know, where can someone get the results of that study that was done by Flone? And also, if you were to point out one thing that stood out for you in that study, what would it be?
Thank you so much, Edna. So the study is currently at the tail end of the project, and in due time we'll be able to share our findings. So one of the things that stood out for me is the importance of group financing, the group lending option, particularly for those who are starting up. So the women in low economic blocks. So the utilization of this model to finance asset. So that particularly stood out for me. And then just look at the different financing models, just picking out the key features, having sort of a hybrid model, sort of what we've talked about, making something that works for us, contextualizing it to our situations. Yeah, so those are some of the things that stood out for me in that research.
Thank you so much, Evan. So now to Winnie, because you're the one that is providing the money, I have a question. And this is based on something that I've noticed as a trend. So at UN Habitat, we had a project called CESA where we were updating different funding opportunities that were there through a newsletter. And I used to do that every month. So one thing I discovered is a lot of the funding is stopping, especially related to climate financing. So I don't know if you have seen that, and maybe would you have an idea or maybe a suggestion as to why you would think some funders are shying away from funding e-mobility projects or climate or energy related projects?
All right. I think I'll try to be very diplomatic. But overall, yes, granted, in the development stage, most development field, or rather development financing space, what has happened is we're seeing a shifting of priorities, right? And it's more aligned to where the organization is. That is one of the things that we're seeing, in that even they're scaling back on financing as a whole. Let's just start there. It's not just within energy, but within also different countries. So DFIs are just scaling back when it comes to funding, and more becoming, or rather focusing more on funding their the country priorities. Now, when it comes to other investors in terms of e-mobility, I think it's the, one of the things that they mentioned is the reason why they're scaling back. I can't speak to renewable energy, I'll speak to e-mobility. And based on what discussions that we've had, is that the business model remains. Most of the companies are coming with one solution in terms of, I want to deploy bikes in this region, but we want to see an ecosystem. Charging infrastructure remains a hurdle when it comes to scaling e-mobility in the space. So that's why they're combining both deployment of bikes or overall mobility solutions with the deployment of or funding of charging infrastructure in the space, so that they can go hand in hand rather than funding just one aspect of the business. So we are seeing them looking at such deals as a whole rather than the one-off e-mobility solution. So again, partnerships, if you're not working on both deployment and on rolling out. So partnerships can help with that. And also looking at how exactly can the ecosystem as a whole come into play. There's also different technologies that can help with that. Some of the topic points have been on interoperability and how exactly, so that a company, if you're deploying solutions such as E2-wheelers, E3-wheelers, you don't have to deal with the charging infra. You just deal, someone is wholly as a country, for example, is dealing with everything to do with the battery and battery swapping stations and everything else. So we're seeing them looking differently at the deals that they're looking at in terms of the ecosystem as a whole, not just funding one-off initiatives. I think that's a thing. So partnership is proving to be king when it comes to what funders are looking at. That's what I can say.
Thank you so much, Winnie. And you've just reminded me a question that I had really hoped to ask Celeste and Carol, because I know that in the models that they use for their different companies, I've seen them doing a lot of collaborations that go beyond just one type of vehicle and also one type of solution. So maybe just to start off with Celeste and then with Carol, partnered with Drop Access, for example, to do with the Drop Access refrigerator, for example. So I just want to know, like, what prompted you to do such collaborations, and also what are some of the challenges that involve going beyond what you do on a day-to-day, like e-bikes, and moving beyond that and adapting something new and expanding your business to another sector?
You pointed to one collaboration. There are a few more that are not necessarily as public as that one. I think that collaboration in this space is not only needed, but it's actually what should happen for especially from an impact point of view, for us to be able to actually get the benefits of what the promise of e-mobility, of access to energy, need for people to own their transportation method. So the other thing that we talked about is also about the high capex. If on the one hand, funding is not readily available, and on the other hand, you have high capex needs, you're going to need to be able to partner with others so that you are not basically forking out that capex on your own. Thirdly, I think in the space of climate change and of needs in agriculture, in health, in e-mobility, one has to try to find synergies and access to energy. One has to try to find synergies so that the productive use approach is one that actually benefits everybody. Winnie mentioned, for example, this charging infrastructure. The reality is that in other countries, the benefit of e-mobility comes from the fact that you are actually no longer going to pay quote unquote the fuel tax, right? You will have access to energy at home. You'd be able to plug in your vehicle, your two-wheeler, or even your car into a socket that is available to you, because the grid is not only stable but also from renewable energy. The reality is that in our countries, that is still a problem. You know, not everybody has access to energy at home. So how do you now partner with people who are providing renewable energy access so that people can have access to the real promise, which is cheaper transport? You need partnerships for this. You can't do it all alone.
Thank you so much, Celeste. So I think we'll have Carol also just addressing it, because I know that Isafiri has done a lot beyond just working on the two-wheelers. You also have like a gender component and charging infrastructure. Maybe you can also just mention something.
Yes, thank you. Like I said, and I don't want to repeat, Celeste has covered that very, very well. The idea is not to reinvent the wheel. There is no need for that unless your innovation really is something novel. It's always good to look around you and see what is available, who is already doing something in this sector. And like Celeste said, if it's renewable energy, how can you tap into that and linking it to electric mobility? So for us, we are providing renewable energy. So it was important for us to already have assemblers or manufacturers who deploy EVs as partnerships, right? So there's the aspect of also finding innovative business models, and that can come from aligning your key business model with what is already available and behaviors that are already available, or consumer behaviors that are already going on in the market. We also learned that partnering with communities, because we work in rural areas, was quite fundamental for us. We are, most of us grew up in these communities, or they're very similar in many ways. And you find existing, table banking for women. You find existing boda SACCOs and riders. You find existing projects by county governments that you can tap into. So partnering with this on lower down the chain, community groups and all these other stakeholders was very fundamental in acceptance of the business, which also shows credibility when you are approaching a funder, because you're existing as part of a community, and the community is fighting for you to stay alive because they are relying on your product. So that has also been quite fundamental for us. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to give Winnie 1 minute to just answer something. I know that you, at Siemens, you normally have a project that supports startups. Maybe you can speak about it to someone who's not aware about that. I know that you funded a couple of startups and also pilots. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, we have a call for applications for research and development pilots. Hereby, we support companies in Kenya, but overall in Ghana, Nigeria, Tanzania, Uganda, whereby we provide funding for companies that are looking to pilot, whether that's a business model or even an e-mobility solution with the hope to scale. Granted, I think at this stage, we're looking to shift that to different aspects. There'll still be R&D funding, but overall, we're looking at how exactly can we enable the ecosystem further to make sure that charging infrastructure, for example, is tackled. So at that stage, that's where we are. We've so far funded 5 companies in Kenya. That is Kiri, a joint venture of EcoBoda, Kiri, and also Transboda. They're looking at interoperability of batteries in the space. We funded Iwaka on this call. We've also funded Enviroserve, who are looking at the end of life of batteries, which is something that needs to be handled at this moment, despite the lack of volumes. And then we have funded, sorry. I funded Kazi Mobility stroke Ride Electric, who are looking into local manufacturing of electric bicycles, and also Tumaini Innovation Center, which is based in Eldoret. They are looking at developing, again, a locally manufactured E3-wheeler that can tackle transport of farmer goods from one region to the next, but also looking at how mechanization of the e-mobility, mechanization of agricultural activities using the e-mobility product. So that's some of our portfolio companies. And then we have others in Nigeria, Ghana, and Tanzania and Uganda, which I will not touch on today.
Thank you so much, Winnie. That was very insightful. And lastly, I'll give Irene an opportunity, and then we can wrap up the Q&A session. Irene, you can unmute. Yes, Irene.
Thank you. This is Irene from Chick's Garage. My question goes to Winnie. Is it that you have a call for concept notes for the research, or is it an ongoing thing? Because considering, for example, us, we deal with the end users, and we are female mechanics. What opportunities are there based on the gaps? How do we go about it in providing a concept note for a research?
Right. So here's what happens. Because of our project with GIZ, we had to call for applications. That is within the confines of the GIZ project. As Siemens Foundation as a whole, what we are doing going forward is working more with the companies in the space. So we will be inviting either concept notes, either with a louder call for applications, either next year, thereabouts. But for now, most of the funding opportunities are closed. So therefore, we'll be going forward, we'll be reaching out to companies, seeing exactly how they're working in the space, what exactly they're looking to solve, but also having some R&D calls, whether that's privately or publicly. So we're yet to decide how exactly we will be inviting concept notes. However, we do invite companies to meet with us. That is one avenue that you can have. I can share the email after this to sort of pitch to us your approach so that we can have that in mind when it comes to the different solutions or funding opportunities that we're looking to roll out in the coming year.
Thank you so much, Winnie. I hope that Irene has been answered. Just before I hand it over back to Joy, I would just like to point out that at UN Habitat, we also give technical advice and do capacity building. We support pilot projects, pilot demonstrations, and also we support startups with our different projects. So we have projects across we've done projects in different parts of Africa. At the moment, we're currently working actively in Tanzania on a project called POTZA. It's an EU-funded project. So if you're in Tanzania, you can always figure out you can check on Google about the POTZA project. We have a component for startups that is part of just supporting two-wheelers and three-wheelers just to scale up in Tanzania. So thank you so much. I hand it over back to Joy.
Thank you, Edna. A big thank you also to our incredible speakers for sharing your experiences so generously, and to everyone who tuned in today, asked questions, and made time to be part of this space. We can't thank you enough. We hope that you've taken home some nuggets of wisdom, and we can't wait to also hear some success stories. As I wrap up, we're still accepting applications for those who may be interested in joining the Women in Mobility Network. I think you can already see a QR code that has been displayed. I've also shared the links in the chat section. Just to let you know that we've also recently launched a mentorship program, bringing together seasoned experts in this space to guide young professionals over a 3-month period. To be a part of this initiative, you can submit your interest using the link shared as well. There's more information on this on our social media channels, so please do follow us there. We will ensure that the recording of this webinar is available to you. You can search Flone Initiative on our YouTube channel. You should be able to access this from Monday. So that said, I would love to wish everyone a very happy weekend and a successful venture. Until next time, goodbye. Thank you. So please feel free to log off.